This is Space Cat's Peace Turtles, the unofficial podcast for Fantasy Flight's Twilight Imperium. Episode 56, Tournament Drafting. Music by Ben Prunty, featuring Matt Martins and Hunter Donaldson. Hunter, it's officially closed. The submissions for the tournament are over. Like we are sending out messages this week to people to sign up for the tournament officially based on if you have submitted, to the Patreon, whatever. And,
the polls are
go
closed.
Time, babe. The polls are closed.
The polls
baby.
are closed.
So
you should have got your vote in today.
We have a lot of work ahead of us, but the first step of that process is really just finalizing how many people are in this tournament and building a structure for the tournament based on that number, right? I mean, it's kind of hard to say what this is going to look like because it's this whole time has been dependent on how many people are actually around.
Yeah, that math is going to be fun. Have fun doing that, Matt. That's going to be...
I'm going to probably just make a big point to outsource that to some smarter math people on the Discord or something, because I certainly am not equipped to do that on my own. But I don't know. We don't know what it's going to look like yet. We're kind of playing that part by ear, but there are parts that we definitely do know how they're going to work, right? We've set a lot of rules in stone, even already, through the podcast, as we've talked these past few weeks.
Right.
We've been kind of nailing down different rulings and different, approaches. So I'm getting pretty freaking excited to just start watching these games play out.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is going to be a really fun episode. We're going to cover what kind of the ban and pick phase for the tournament is going to be, how that's specifically going to look like.
Yeah, it's election night in America, which is where we live, of course. Right. And that's what we're going to do today. Today's election day. We're gonna pick some factions to be in this game of our tournament.
And and at the end we're gonna have some predictions of what we think we're gonna see as far as factions that are gonna make it into games very frequently.
Right.
It's a really interesting spread. We've kind of already theory crafted a little bit on how the ban and pick phase is gonna play out in a lot of games, and we kind of ran some mock ban and pick phases.
Right.
It's really fun. I'm really excited. This is kind of a poker-ish episode, I feel like.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
It's going to have flavors of that flagship episode, too. There's not going to be rolling dice, but we're going to kind of just, go through some stuff and be a little bit anecdotal. We're going to try to be informative, but there's going to be some just weird anecdotal stuff, too. So hopefully there's plenty for everyone. I do want to say also that I'm really excited because what I think we want to start getting into is we finalized what we want to do with the rules, and so from there we can start to break down how you strategically play into those rules, right? Before, when it was kind of figuring out exactly how do we want the ban and pick phase to work, that's one thing, figuring out what is kind of maybe the most fun setup. But now we have a setup that we really like, and we're going forward with that setup. And so then it becomes a conversation of how do people manipulate that setup to get the factions they want or whatever. And that's kind of what today's episode, that's what the purpose is to sort of help you there's plenty of people who will kind of figure this out right away, but there's a lot of people who maybe will have never played with this setup method and might not get a chance to get a game in before their first tournament game. So they're going to be going into it blind. So we wanted to give people kind of an idea of how things play out and a little bit what to expect, basically, from this ban and pick phase.
Yeah. So all of the emails have been sent out, correct? By this time?
Speaking from the past and looking forward into the future, I'm going to say that yes, by this point, I should have sent a message out on Patreon, and I guess I'm making that commitment right now to do that. Messages should be sent out. You should check your Patreon if you were a member of the Patreon, and check those messages, and there will be a link to a Google document form submission thing that you can fill out. That helps me organize people based on time zone. as well as availability, like day of the week availability, and then we will just have to go from there in terms of how we schedule out
Oh
these
my
games.
God.
It's going to be a process, so everyone don't think that like the tournament starts in a couple days. If anything, like we're leaving a couple weeks open for people to, you know, get those messages responded to, right? Like it's going to be a week or so before I say, okay, completely closed. This is the exact number of people in the tournament. I want to give everyone a chance to definitely sign up. So it may be a while before we actually start playing these games because there's a lot of work that has to go into it on the front end.
But I'm so excited. Like I'm really, really excited
I'm getting giddy.
to start this tournament. And yeah, I think a lot of I think we're gonna pop out of the tournament talk every once in a while, week to week. But I would expect a lot of, and I mean, like we've been talking about the tournament a lot, like as of late, anyways. But I mean, like we're really gonna be ramping up to it, and then once the tournament starts, we're gonna be talking about a lot of the play that we're seeing. And
yeah,
just
honestly,
kind of
fair
that
warning. There's like a decent chance that every episode while the tournament is going on is just about the games that happened, you know, that previous weekend or whatever. Like the idea is probably that Hunter and I are moderating a game every single weekend, and the following episode will just kind of be a breakdown of the events of that game. I don't know if that will hold true completely or if that will just be a component of every episode, but we expect to give you coverage of the games as they happen.
Right. Yeah, I'm super stoked. So let's run through. Today we're going to be talking about the pregame, the ban and pick phase that we have for selecting for faction selection in the tournament. And Matt, do you want to help us, like walk us through how does that process run out? Like how does that work?
It's changed a couple times too.
Yeah.
So let's kind of put it on the books right now. This is the sequence of events that happens, and if you want to get in your practice games to learn this method yourself, here is the official Patreon tournament ban pick selection method. First things first, everyone, there will be a pre-made map. Hunter and I are making maps, and we will put them out there. We will have already tried to balance them and everything. Probably every round will be a different map, but within each round, we kind of expect to have everyone judged on the same map is sort of our goal. So there will be a pre-made map, and you can expect it to be decently balanced, or at the very least, you know, kind of what we talked about in our map building episode, which is like if one person has more of one thing, they will have less of another thing. So once you see the map, everyone can sit down and everyone will roll a die. And this die roll isn't a super important one. The important one will come later, but this die roll will just pick a quick little picking order. Everyone will shuffle up the factions, and everyone will receive 3 factions in their hand. One person, of course, will only receive 2 in a 6-player game. There's 17 factions, so one person only gets 2. We'll call them player F. Player F gets 2 factions. Everyone else gets 3. Then everyone secretly bans 1 faction. We basically can go in order, but it doesn't really matter. We can all do it at once. Everyone will ban 1 faction, but you don't know what the other people are banning while you're banning your own. Once everyone has banned a faction, we take the remaining 11 factions and make a new pool. We're going to completely, and we make this pool face up. We flip them all over. Here are the 11 factions that will be in this game, or here are the 11 factions that might be in this game. Then, in the reverse of that picking order, we're going snake draft, right? So the last person to get to ban their faction is now the first one to, using the right verbiage here is weird, so I'm going to say select a faction to be placed in the final pool. Mm-hmm. Because this process is not picking who you are playing with yet. We're not there yet. So you select the faction that you want to have in the game. And this makes it a really distinctly different from just picking a faction, because this is sort of a co-op build of what kind of game do we want to play, right? If someone inserts Hakan, that's going to change the types of other factions people want in, because people will probably want a faction that plays well off of Hakan. So you have to think about those kinds of relationships. So everyone will pick or select 1 faction to go into the pool, with the player who only got to choose between 2 factions are player F. Player F, when they go, whatever order of the process they're in, they select 2 factions that go in the pool. This is the biggest change from what we previously have said on the show. We tried it, and other people suggested this other method, and we preferred this new method. So the player who only got to pick between 2 factions to ban now selects 2 factions. What this means is we are, at the end of everyone's selecting factions, we're left with 7 factions in a new pool. This pool is what goes alongside our player seeding order. And we've talked about our seeding order draft selection in the past. So from this point forward, everyone rolls a new die. We want a completely new randomization of turn order. And this new turn order, the first person in the turn order gets to either select their faction of the available 7 or their position of the available 6. And then we go through the turn order with player 6 going twice. So they would pick both their faction and their seating position, and we work our way back up towards the top. So the very first person to select, if they picked their position first, they're going to have last selection of the factions.
Or vice versa as well.
Or vice versa. But the biggest point is, because there are 7 factions, there will be 1 left over. This is to kind of avoid anyone getting... We basically decided that positions, we're hoping to have balanced maps, so that part should be fairly balanced. So it seems a little crazy if someone gets to like get a troll Winnu pick in there and then someone gets stuck with it. We wanted a little bit of wiggle room to keep someone from getting totally screwed over by faction selection. So at the very least, you have a choice between 2 factions to pick from, and that so far in all of our test games has felt like a pretty good balance. So then, after everyone has a faction and a position, we roll a third time to determine who is the speaker. Highest roll gets speaker. We tried including speaker order in our drafts, and we just don't like the amount of power it gives to the pregame. We don't want the pregame to completely determine the course of the game. We would rather speaker token be a little bit random, and you just have to deal with that as you would in most normal games of TI. So that's the whole process. That will be everything that we do pregame. Once that speaker token is selected, we'll do all the normal stuff, divvy up secret objectives, reveal the public objectives, and then begin the game.
Yeah, cool. Well, I'm super excited. I think it's a really cool process. We're obviously always open to feedback about this process. Please let us know what you think of it. This is what we're sticking with, I think, for the tournament as of now. Yeah. But obviously, we're gonna see how it plays out, and who knows? Who knows?
By no means do we think this is the gold standard best way to do it. We think we want to try this for a full tournament, and I think there's plenty of arguments for doing it completely different ways in other tournaments. If anything, I think in the future of just TI in general, I think that's going to be kind of what determines the different styles of tournaments, right? Each tournament is going to have its own sort of faction selection. At Gen Con, it was everyone just picks a faction, and then we do the normal competitive, board setup.
Right.
And that led to very specific kinds of games. Hunter and I are trying to develop this thing so that we get specific kinds of games as well.
Right.
And I think every tournament just has to decide what kind of game it wants to incentivize. So what we want to do now is showcase what this process looks like, and kind of... This is going to lead up to what our predictions are of what it's going to be not picked very often, what will get picked a lot. And in the end, I think we're going to both try to just make a random stab in the dark at what faction we think is going to win the most games. Maybe not win the whole tournament, but what faction will statistically have won the most games throughout the tournament. That's something I'm curious to make a prediction of. So we're going to run through, just between Hunter and I, we're going to kind of mock run through this process of banning and picking factions to showcase the sort of decision making you make, because that's something that I think is very fun about this process. This is why I like what we've come up with, because like I said earlier, it kind of forces you to decide what kind of game you want to play. When one faction gets selected to be in that final pool, everyone goes, okay, well, I want a faction that plays off of the relationship that I might be able to have with that faction. And once there's 4 factions on there, you get a sense of what kind of game this is going to be. So the 5th and 6th person to pick get to make some really interesting decisions of what kind of factions they allow into the game. Again, not knowing what they're going to end up with necessarily, so you have to just pick what is going to leave the best structure of game available.
But then what I also like about it is like obviously me and Matt are going to be doing these mock runs right now, and so we're going to bring like who we are as players to it.
Yeah.
But there are going to be lots of people in the tournament that aren't really going to think this way. That are just going to be like, I want to try and get this faction in because I want to play this faction. And I think mixing those people in with this way of thinking as well is going to be really interesting and actually like shake this up a lot. So like I don't fully expect like the tournament ban and pick phases to play out exactly like how these are about to.
No, so many players don't think the way Hunter and I think and don't have the priorities of factions that you and I have.
Right.
So it's gonna and some people are a little bit more troll. Like I've played this on TTS and I've seen people try to get Sardak in the mix and things like that. Like people think that they can hedge their bets and not end up with a bad faction and you know, I think we will see some of that. I don't think, you know, maybe it's that's a little bit of the like crazy poker player decision kind of thing to make, but I think we're gonna see a lot of interesting decisions made and yeah, I'm excited to see how it plays out. But let's see how it plays out with just us doing it.
Right. Cool. All right. So we are me and Matt are gonna pretend to be basically every player in the ban phase. We're gonna like make decisions together. So Matt has like his actual tiles in front of him, his home system tiles, and so let's get that first hand. What's hand number 1?
So the first one we randomly shuffled is Arborek, Sardak Nor, and Mentak Coalition. So already off to like this is a weaker hand, right? In terms of just like what are powerhouse factions I would love to like end up with or I want to keep from getting in the game. So this one leaves us with some weird decisions. I think the types of decision making you make in this situation are, do I want to just like ban Sardak because they're so bad I would not want to end up with them? Or do I want to ban something like Mentak because I don't like what Mentak does to the game?
Right,
you know what I mean?
like
I don't want to just be lorded over by a Mentak all game. And if I ended up with Mentak myself, I don't know if I want to be forced to have the kinds of relationships Mentak has to have.
Right. So those are and I think Arborek is just really safe in this hand because Arborek isn't bad enough to be like or isn't even good enough either to be like we got to get rid of. Like I think Arborek is just kind of in the middle of these three basically.
I agree.
So it's either Sardak or Mentak that has to go, and I have a feeling like we completely disagree actually on this first hand because I would want to ban Mentak because I don't want to play against Mentak. I do not like playing against Mentak. And especially, you know, just right out of the gate knowing that, like, this is not going to be a Mentak game. That tells me a lot more about the game that is going to happen than if I'm like, well, Sardak's not because Sardak's probably not going to make it anyways, you know?
Right. Well, and that's where my logic is going to come in, which is I think... from a general sense, like it's not a very good idea to let Mentak through when, the basic idea being like who in their right mind is going to pick Sardak to be in the final pool? Probably almost no one. Whereas Mentak might actually make it, and I agree with you that I don't know if I like what Mentak is going to do to the board. So I agree with you. I think we should get rid of Mentak.
All right.
I think they're a better faction than Sardak, and I think we can weed Sardak out later.
Okay, so Mentak is out. Wow, what a crazy start already. Already this is different than the ones that we did before.
All right, our next one up is the Barony, Xcha, and Necro.
Okay. This is interesting.
This is a tough choice.
These are all kind of
fairly
in the
middle of the pack. Yeah, exactly. I'm a little bit inclined to lean. So one thing I've talked about off the show before is with this method, I think it is personally always best to ban the best possible faction.
Right, but who's that in this three?
I know, it's hard to say in this, but the logic there being the bad factions are going to get weeded out when we select factions for the final thing.
Yeah.
So I think you're always better off getting rid of powerhouses in this situation.
So you want to get rid of Barony?
Lower the thing. I'm leaning Barony, but Necro is kind of up there in terms of just like what they do to the game.
Wow, it's weird because the first two ones that we did, I felt like we were on the same page about everything, but I was wanting to say Xcha because
I'm leaning more and more towards Necro based purely off of Necro can, if I'm playing as Necro, they can have a hard time with objectives just depending on what comes up. it really changes the scope of your game, what objectives come out there.
Right.
And if I'm playing against a Necro, it's sort of the Mentak argument of like, oh, I don't want to have to deal with just like that whole situation.
Right. But if we ban extra, then we and this might not be good. I'm just throwing this out there. I'm trying to think about all the angles. If we ban extra, then we know for sure that the potential for that barony necro nasty relationship is still there. So do we want that? Like, do we want to see that? Because it's.
I don't think we do. I don't think I want to see two factions with NES and Duranium.
Right.
armor.
Well, but I'm saying like the likelihood that you're going to be one of those two factions is like
Sort of like a 1 and 3.
yeah. It could be. I don't know.
End.
Like
it's hard to. Yeah, there's a lot of math that happens
Right.
between now and then.
But it's there's a pretty good chance that if Barony and Necro are in that pool, I'm thinking that Barony and Necro, it's pretty likely that they would both be picked and not just one. Because you'd assume Barony would get picked first for the pool, the final pool, that is. And then someone would see that and be like, ooh, well, I want to get in on that. But I'm willing to defer to, you're saying to ban Necro?
It's what I'm feeling because I just know, if we're thinking too in terms of like, I'm only looking at these 3 cards right now, we don't know about the fact that Mentak is in there or is out and like that Sardak and Arborek are in there, right? As a player, all we know are these 3 factions. I am more afraid of what tech Necro might be able to get advantage of and what kind of game they might be able to have.
Yeah.
I'm more afraid of that than I am of Extra and Barony. Like, I feel like I can deal with a Barony and an Extra, but a Necro could, like, have some crazy stuff happen to them.
How about this? Since it's our first real disagreement, I'll defer to you, and next time
I'll give you one
next
later,
time we do
Deal.
me. So Necro is banned.
Okay. Next 3. Clan Asar, Universities of Jolnar, and the Asarl tribes. This is one of those kind of autos for me. None of them are strong enough to supersede Jolnar. I just, like, it would be a disaster if Jolnar got into the game. I think that's the flaw of this system that we have in place, is things like Jolnar and Sol are very rarely going to make it into games because they're just so good that no one's going to allow it. So yeah, I feel like that's a fairly automatic.
But this is a very good hand. These are 3
it is a really good hand
factions.
because I would put Sar up there in this same category too of like, ooh, Sar can be really good, and I don't want to see that. But when Jolnar is there, it's like nothing is worse than just a Jolnar getting a bunch of automatic points. And
I'm with you though. I would if I was playing in the tournament, I'm playing for keeps. I'm not putting Jolnar in. I don't want to play against Jolnar.
Next up is the L1Z1X, the Emirates of Hakan, and the Winu.
Okay.
So this goes to say to my logic earlier, like, I always think it's best to get rid of the best faction, but there's something to be said for, like, the Winu clause, right? Like, are we really going to allow Winu to be an option in this game? Now, the argument is, if you allow Winu into the first pool, there's no way anyone's going to put him in the game. But maybe someone's crazy.
Yeah, but
Do we allow for the crazies?
I think if we want to be consistent with this run, when we had the first hand with Sardak, we were like, you know what?
Not a big
Sardak's probably not going to get picked. The likelihood that I'm going to end up with Sardak is really low. So I'm going to apply that same logic because remember, like we're playing individuals that can't see each other's hands, so we don't know
anything
what
else.
Yeah. So I'm thinking if this is all I'm seeing, I am either banning Hakan or L1.
Yeah, I agree.
I
think
don't
it's smarter
really
to get
know
rid of the
which
better.
one. I'm kind of
So this is where you have to think about, like, okay, what's the impact on the game?
yeah.
I might not end up as Hakan. Do I want to play against Hakan or do I want to play against Lizix?
You know, I think I'm gonna say ban Hakan,
I agree.
which is weird because we in the mock.
We did a few
trials,
mock runs and Hakan made it into every single game.
but yeah, not with this matchup. All right.
Yeah.
Hand 5.
So this is the last 3-player hand. The next one we're going to do is going to be the 2-in-1. But this hand is the Yin Brotherhood, the Federation of Soul, and the Nalu Collective.
Oh.
Now, that same logic, I think, applies to Soul. It sucks that Nalu is in there. I hate letting Nalu get through, but you and I are on record of just really despising when Soul gets into games because they can just easily run away with it if they do things right.
It's interesting to me that I mean I think I'm totally in agreement with you here. We're definitely banning Soul. But what that has allowed is in both the Jolnar and the Soul Hands, really good factions got to get in because we felt we had to ban Soul and Jolnar. Like, we let Nalu in on the Soul Hand, and on the Jolnar hand, we let Sar in and Isarl in.
Yeah. One of the test things that we did before we started recording had like mostly bad factions in the final 11. So yeah, this is a drastically different end result. But you know, that's why it's anecdotal.
Right.
All right, the last two. So the player F, oh my god, of course, has Muat and Ghosts of Krius.
Wow.
So which logic are we applying here?
In this case, I don't know why I'm flipping now all of a sudden. I'm like, no, now I want Muat out. I'm if this is all that I know, I don't want to like.
Well, you're Hunter Donaldson, who has this horrible track
That's true.
record.
I have a really big bias. I think the logic of, I'm not going to get like stuck with this doesn't work if you're seeing so little. Like, you only get to know one thing that's going into the pool. So if you're only putting a bad thing into the pool,
it's not great.
yeah, I feel like that logic doesn't make as much sense. I would almost want to put I wouldn't want to put the best thing into the pool, but I would want to put a middling faction.
Yeah, it really comes down to like, I'm okay with ghosts being in the pool,
right?
But like, I can't let Muat through.
All right, cool. So we are banning Muat. So what is our pool?
So our final pool, not our final pool, our initial pool, our pool of 11 is the Ghosts of Krius, the Nalu Collective. If you're playing along at home, you can write this down. The Yin Brotherhood, the Winnu, the L1Z1X, the Isarl Tribes, the Clan of Sar, the Extra Kingdom, the Barony of Letnev, Sardak Nor, and the Arborek.
Wow. Okay.
So now this is public information for all 6 players. We're looking at all of these 11 factions, and we are now officially starting to decide what are we doing? You know, what kind of game do we want to play here? What are we hoping to accomplish with this game? Some of the things that I feel like I'm noticing are there's a decent amount of like not great factions, but there's no power. Like, we did a good job of getting rid of terrible factions and powerhouses, and it feels like everything is fairly middle of the pack. So from this point forward, it's really just about like what ends up getting let in. So Hunter, do you want to go first? Or I think we're going to pick these one at a time and like try to make justifications for why we're picking what we're picking.
Yeah. Where are we going to put the player that picks 2?
Let's just to make it kind of random, because when we've done it in our previous 2, we did it like first and last in 2 different versions. So I think we should just make them third.
Okay.
Just something in the middle.
So I will go first, and I will pick based off of the pool that I have in front of me. Let's see. I want to talk through my logic.
Sure.
So Nalu is probably the best. Nalu and Sar are kind of the 2 that I'm feeling like, these are the really solid ones.
And I'd put Lizix close behind, especially if you're like a comfortable Lizix player. You know, there's those types of people that are just like, no, I can do some stuff with Lizix.
Yeah.
But I would agree that Nalu and Sar are our 2 favorites. Isarl is up there as well, for sure. Isarl makes huge plays and can get a lot done. So.
You know, what I actually feel like is it's funny, because the logic of this, I think, is maybe a little silly, but I think Extra is actually the smartest first pick here, because I don't know anything, like, and I'm not seeing a lot of connections between these factions, like obvious, like, obviously somebody's going to pick this and then this, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So I'm just thinking, like, might as well pick somebody that is probably just going to, like, be scrappy against any of these factions, basically.
Right. I want something that's just can stand on its own.
Right. I
mean, my argument would be is like Extra has a hard time winning games, and it's like, I don't know if I want to end up with them, but like, I don't know. Extra always has this feeling of like, yeah, they don't have good statistics, but they're not necessarily a bad race. Maybe I can do well with them. That's how I always feel with Extra.
Yeah, I think there's just I mean, obviously this is just for the pool though. So my hypothetical player isn't necessarily going to play Extra,
right?
So much as like, I think I could just stand to see Extra in this group regardless. And also, I'm wondering to see, like, I'm going first, and I'm looking at this pool thinking, like, so are we going to, because we could go different directions with this pool. There are some good factions, and then there are some bad factions, actually. There's Sardak, there's Winnu.
There's some very bad ones, for sure.
There's Arborek, like, would not really fare well, I feel like, in this pool. Arborek, at least, is going to be, like, kind of a long shot, I feel like. So, yeah,
I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, the only danger zones with Arborek are Lizix and Barony, I guess.
Right. But are the,
Maybe
well, let's see.
Maybe it's a weaker point.
See, L1 and Barony is what I saw that made me think I'm going to pick Extra just to see how this shakes out. So let's see what you pick.
I was leaning towards Sar, but based off of your Extra pick, I think I have to go with Nalu. I think Nalu's the strongest faction out there.
Okay.
I would hope to get them. And they also have some defensive capability that is going to match Extra. So it's like, okay, if they're not going towards Extra, I also don't want them to go towards me. So hopefully, I think that can work. And I don't want to play a Sar that ends up sitting next to Extra. I think that would be a disaster. So yeah, I'm going to pick Nalu Collective.
Okay. So am I now playing?
You get to pick. Yeah, you're player F, and you get to pick 2 factions to add to this pool.
Well, so since you went the direction I thought you were going to go of picking the superstars,
of course,
I think I'm just going to throw more superstars in, and I'm going to pick L1 and Sar.
Okay,
and just be like, all right, let's do it.
We're playing a tough game with good factions. Yeah,
right.
And then I mean, I feel like probably Isarl can do the most here. I mean, I want direct hits against Lizix. I want just to be able to maybe hold off a Sar. I feel like Isarl is probably the best pick.
Yeah.
To go off of in this. I'm leaning towards maybe a Barony, but I think Barony up against Nalu is a pretty difficult thing to do because Barony, it's not like Barony fires a ton of shots. Like to beat a Nalu, you need a bunch of shots to kill all the fighters.
Right.
So I don't like that, but what you can use instead of a bunch of shots are a bunch of action cards. So I think I want to go with Isarl.
I think that's a smart pick too.
So this is your last pick.
Yeah. So what do I want to pick to maybe shake this up? Or is this like...
What kind of game do we have right now? We have 2 pretty defensive factions. One that can get around. Nalu can get around okay, but Extra's very defensive. Sar is doing the Sar thing. Right. L1 can be pretty aggressive. And Isarl, makes big game making. This is just like you just need a great... It's like you said, I don't think we've established a theme. Yeah, sometimes you get like a Hakan in there, and that determines a bunch of relationships. But we're not in that situation right now. I think it's like, no, I just need something that can combat with these big factions.
Because I'm gonna take a risk here, and I think if I was in this situation, I would take the same risk. I'm gonna pick Yin because I think that if Barony's not in, then while L1 is here, and that's scary. A lot of these other players are not going to be able to deal with a strong ground game, basically. Yeah. L1, of course, and if Barony gets thrown, if you throw in Barony here at the end, which it might be the right play, then Yin might be a bad choice in this pool, but we'll see. What do you think?
And here's the interesting point to that, and this is something we can't recreate that well, but in this situation, we could start throughout this whole process, we can be discussing this, right?
Right.
This is a group effort, and so I think there's some value in hey, please don't pick Barony. I'm putting Yin in here. Would you really want to just have a Yin be totally crushed? You might end up with that.
Well,
Yin.
but see, I see
those arguments getting made.
Sure, but and I mean, I think everybody's got to pick whatever they got to pick.
Right.
And I could see someone counter picking Barony right now, and I think that would make sense. You could also maybe
just to be clear to the listener, what's left is the Ghosts of Krius, the Winnu, the Barony Aletnev, Sardak Nor, and Arborek. So the reason we're talking so much about Barony, Barony is by far and above the best faction here.
Right.
Ghost is probably the next. Maybe Ghost and Arborek are on the same level. And then I'm not picking Winnu or Sardak. No way in any chance would I select either of those to be in this mix.
Right.
So it really comes down to this Ghost, Arborek, or Barony situation.
Right. Or if the thing is, you could pick one of the bad factions, and it would just be assumed that that faction is going to get left out.
Right. Yeah, because we're only going to allow. Yeah, that's a good argument of if I'm looking at Extra, Nalu, L1, Sar, Isarl, and Yin as our 6 factions, and I throw in some junk, then like I'm guaranteeing that that's going to be it. So if I keep Barony out as well, then I don't want, if anything, I'm kind of agreeing with that logic of if I look at those, that's the spread of those 6, I like my odds with all of those. If I add in Barony, it screws some stuff up unless Yin is the one that gets left out. But, I'm the new Matt Martins. I'm the reformed Matt Martins that isn't into Yin Brotherhood.
Right.
So I think I do kind of do a weird play, which is to throw the Winnu in there.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, we're coming into this without actually having a map in front of us, and there's going to be lots of decisions that are based off of the map, right? Of what you can actually do. Oh, I can get a yellow text skip, and actually maybe Winnu could do so. They can't, but those types of decisions get made when there's an actual map in front of you. But I think I'm going to throw Winnu in there almost to force it to be those other 6.
Right.
I think that's a weird choice, and I don't think that's going to happen as often in the tournament. But in our test games, I have seen people throw Sardax or something like that in there just purely as you're not going to want to end up with... it's just kind of like a troll pick, but then it's also... It does kind of force some interesting decision-making. So I think I'm going to go with that. So our final pool of 7 is the Xcha, the Nalu, the L1Z1X, Sar, Isarl, Yin, and Winnu.
Yeah. With probably Winnu being left out, I would imagine.
With Winnu probably being left out. So really, those 6, Xcha, Nalu, L1 Sar, Isarl, and Yin, are in this game of this tournament that we would be playing.
Yeah.
Now so from this point forward would be when we, either pick factions or pick positions, but we're going to kind of call it there in terms of like what we're trying to glean from this episode. So Hunter, let's talk a little bit more about sort of the things we went through there and like why we banned, what we think is this spread right now. I'll say this much. This spread that we have, this seems like a pretty common spread.
Yeah. I think there's something about Sar and Isarl, and yeah, like it's all the factions I feel like that are like really good, but not like the best, like really, really solid, but like just below top tier that I think are going to end up in the pool a lot. I think that's the target, basically.
Right. Yeah, and we talked about this before, and I think we're going to work through some logic to determine this, but from this list, 4 out of our final 7, like what we think are the 7 most common factions, right now we just ended up with 4.
Right.
And our previous 2 methods, we ended up with 5 out of 7. So far, we have been dead on with what we think is going to get into a lot of games. So again, that is a downside to this method, is we're going to not see that much faction.
Well, we don't know. We don't
know for sure yet, but it seems like there's probably a more tendency for there to be middle of the pack factions. But personally, for tournament play, I think that is better because if you have an amazing faction, they have a higher odds of just running away with it. So I would rather have all the middle of the pack factions playing, and then you get some, different results. But I think there's plenty of argument to not do this method because you want to be able to see Jolnar and Sol and Winnu in games, right? Like, it is sad that those factions will probably almost never make it into a single game.
Yeah. I think though we'll also see a lot of people that like completely buck this way of thinking, that are just like, no, I'm gonna get Sol into that pool because I'm gonna try and get Sol, and that's how I'm gonna win this whole game, basically.
For sure. So let's talk through what. So the big trick to this system is we are not allowing people to ban from the full list of 17. This would be a very different procedure if we were banning from the full 17, because we are randomizing factions between players, and then you have to ban one of those. That's where we kind of get some interesting decisions.
Right.
But let's talk through like what are your top bans, Hunter? What are the main reasons that you would ban something?
I think the most obvious reason to ban factions are obviously that they're just really good, that they score a lot of points automatically, that they score in their sleep. Jolnar is obviously, I think, kind of number 1 at that.
Yeah.
Sol has such a dynamite plan.
Path to victory, yeah.
Right. That I see Sol getting banned a lot. Also, it's just like, part of this too is just like public opinion. Like there's a lot of like, I think public opinion that those 2 factions are very, very good. And I think even that will take over. Like, I think we might be getting to a point with Soul where like the wave is starting to crest back a little
Yeah.
bit, just because people are so hyper aware of what you do with them. I don't want to.
And we sort of saw that at the Gen Con tournament, which is that, I mean, the difference there too was that people were picking Soul and then they were building the map competitively. So Soul was getting a lot of like bad pice, people were crushing Soul under their thumb. And we didn't really see any Soul victories or Jolnar victories, but it was because of that. I think the competitive galaxy building helps with that. But yeah, I think there's something to be said for in a competitive game. If Soul does get in there, the pendulum sways back up, against Soul a little bit. So I don't think it is the worst thing in the world, but I think more often people are just going to ban them to get them out of the way and not have to deal with it. I think for the same reason, I do think a lot of people will ban Winnu, Muat, and Sardak. For being just so bad. They just don't even want to deal with having that as an option. Now, I made that the case earlier of, well, you should always ban the best one because you're probably not going to end up with one of the worst ones. But there's always a chance that you might. And depending on the hand that you're given, if your hand is just like, I don't know, Ghosts, Yin, and Winnu, maybe you lean more towards Winnu because it's just like, well, those other two aren't like, there's not a big enough decision between the other two, and I might as well just get rid of the junk. That's sort of what we did with Muat, right? In this example. So I think pretty often Winnu, Muat, and Sardak are banned. Who else do you think gets banned? Maybe for other like more superfluous reasons.
I think Hakan and Mentak are going to have a really weird. I think they're going to be like kind of the swing factions, and that I think there's a chance that we'll see a really high like turnout of Hakan and Mentak players that actually make it into games. But I could also see people in the banning phase looking at Mentak and Hakan and being like, I don't want to do that. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah,
basically.
Those are the two factions that most change the context of the game. And there's lots of players who don't want to have the context of the game changed, especially with Hakan. It's just like, oh my gosh, I really don't want to deal with this whole process today. I just want to get rid of Hakan.
I do think that I think there's like a handful of factions that like if they make it to the pool, they are definitely going to the board, And I think Hakan is definitely that faction. I think like if Hakan makes it through the ban phase, then somebody is going to play Hakan. Somebody's going to want to.
Right. I think there's a decent number of factions that are kind of that way. Some other ones that I would ban for the being too good reasons are Nalu and Sar. And this is purely dependent on like what they're up against. But if it's like Nalu versus some middle of the pack stuff, Nalu is very, very, very strong. I think they're a top tier race. If anything, they might be like just as up there as Sol and Jolnar, but the reasons aren't as obvious maybe. But I think Nalu is so strong that I would very often find an excuse to ban them. And the same thing with Sar. Like a Sar in the right game can just run away with things, and I hate playing against it, and playing as them has its dangers. So I think it's usually a fairly safe ban.
Right. Yeah, I think Sar is kind of in a really interesting place here, where I think some people recognize Sar as being like really, really, really competitive and a really, really, really strong faction. And then I think other people, like, you've got some doubters. So I think, Sar is another one that I think you're kind of see like a lot of weird output of them, like them making it into a lot of games, and then them getting banned a lot as well.
Right. And the last one I would put on this list is Arborek, especially just talking to people in the tabletop simulator community, which I think is going to be a decent proportion of our player base. Arborek has a really, really tough early game, and a lot of people know that. So I don't think Arborek is a terrible faction, except for you can get exploited in those first 2 rounds, and I think people will be prone to do that. So for that reason, depending on what the things are in your hand, I could see Arborek getting a decent number of bans, just by nature of like, I don't want to be forced with that like problem of having to protect myself early game.
I think there's something about Arborek, though, that is going to put... this is such a weird point that I'm going to make, but I feel like they are not bad enough not to make it to the pool. Like, I don't think they're going to get banned that much, but I don't think they're going to get picked a lot.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree that they and that's if anything, that's almost how I feel about things like Asarl. No, it's sort of the opposite. Asarl is one I almost put up there with Nalu and Sar, but it's not quite as much. But maybe even like Necro. Necro and Arborek maybe have that similarity.
Yeah,
to me.
I agree. I agree with that.
Where it's just like I don't know if I want to deal with the struggles that faction is going to have this game because they're so
Right.
specific.
Right. It kind of feels like a wild card play to pick Arborek or Necro
Right.
because it's not that they're ineffective races. It's that they need a lot to go right for them.
Right.
But if that happens, then yeah, they're gonna be a lot of fun, and it's gonna get pretty
if we
buck wild.
cut out everything we've already talked about, this Nalu, Sar, Arborek problem, Hakan and Mentak being weird, Winu, Muat, and Sardok being bad, and Sol and Jolnar being way too good, what we're left with is Barony, the Ghost of Krius, the L1Z1X, the Necrovirus, Extra Kingdom, Yin Brotherhood, and the Asarl tribes as like our 7 most common factions to be. And so far, like I said earlier, in every single time we've done it, we've never had less than 4 of those in our in our thing. I think Asarl has been in like every single one, and maybe that's a problem. Like I think Asarl is better than people are giving it credit for. Maybe L1 as well, but in general, those 7 I think are going to end up in a lot of final pools, and we're going to see a lot of those factions played throughout the tournament.
Yeah. What's interesting is because of the system, I don't think we're ever going to see just like these 7 exactly be the final.
I agree, because this is a weird makeup. The makeup of those 7 doesn't play together that well. So like weird decisions get made in between those, but amongst those 7, they'll all get picked a lot.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's always going to be those 7 and then like a weird, a couple weird ones that like, oh, Hakan made it through, or oh, whoa,
Nalu
Sol
got
made it
through the pack.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right. Something like that. Yeah, I'm so excited. In fact, I'm so excited. I wish we could run that mock thing again, just because it's so much fun doing that.
I know. Yeah. Well, what's good is at the time of this recording, we are about to start a game, and we are probably going to go through the drafting method with our Goodyan Brotherhood. We will have, when this episode comes out, we have already played a game with our Goodyan Brotherhood. That's one of the things we do for our Patreon, is we make a point to play with every member of the Goodyan Brotherhood. So Hunter and I are about to play with 4 players. So we actually need to kind of duck out of here pretty soon to get that game started. So Hunter, do you want to jump into the rundown, or do you have any like final thoughts about just kind of this process and everything else? Do you have anything else big that you think has been left out?
I want to do. Let's throw some spaghetti at the wall and make like a really bold prediction.
We need to do that
based on the likelihood of certain factions getting into the game. Like I think if we just did like a all 17, I would be like, statistically Sol or Jolnar will probably do the best. Who do you think is going to win the most games or score the most points rather? Like who do you feel like statistically, not necessarily who's going to win the final game, because that's impossible.
Sure. No, we're not predicting that, but we are predicting what is going to be who's going to score the most points or have the most wins or whatever. Do the best throughout the course of the whole tournament. For me, the answer comes really fast, and I think it's Asarl, because I think Asarl makes those huge, just based on the number of plays of the week that we've received that are all Asarl plays, and knowing what Asarl is capable of, and seeing what they would be up against, right? Like the only thing that stops an Asarl is a Nalu, a Sol, or a Jolnar.
Right.
And so if those aren't in the game, like Asarl feels like the strongest faction in what's left. If I'm picking one faction from Barony, Ghosts, L1, Necro, Extra, Yin, or Asarl, I think Asarl is going to do the best.
I like doing this because we've kind of like established our own like guesses as far as what factions are going to make it in, and then now we're saying from those. So maybe we're going to mess this all up.
Exactly, we're going to completely ruin the meta.
People are going to be like, all right, fine. Well, I'll ban Asarl then if you guys are saying that they're going to win.
Right. But if you ban, the problem is if you ban Asarl, all you're doing is allowing room for Jolnar or Sol or Nala. Like that's why Asarl is doing the best in this situation. Is they're the best of what's left. Mm-hmm. What do you think? Do you agree, or do you got to throw something else out there? I mean, there's good arguments for plenty of these factions.
I think that. I think we're gonna see a lot of Sar get banned and get picked, and I think Sar. Is the most like potentially crazy faction in play in the tournament. Unless like the public opinion just completely turns against Sar overall and everybody's like, no, we're not playing with Sar period. But yeah, I think we could see Sar do really, really well in the tournament.
Yeah. So there you go. There's our picks. Asarl and Sar for most points or like most victories. I don't know. It's not really a thing.
just does the best statistically.
Right. So let's break down. We're not going to do errata this week because, well, first off, just all the stuff the responses
Ooh, wait,
we got to last week's-
can we
what?
say who we think is going to do the worst? Can we be
Sure.
mean as
Yeah.
well? The worst that
I
would
think
actually make it in?
extra. I mean, I think extra is going to make it into a lot of games because I think people always have, like I said earlier, people have like a false confidence with extra,
Right.
But then extra has a really hard time actually scoring points.
Yeah.
So I think extra will be in many games and almost always be at the bottom of the pack.
Right. I agree with that.
Maybe ghosts. I would put ghosts down there as well, but extra especially more so.
I think we'll see more extra picks than ghost picks.
Yeah,
but yeah, I'm gonna say with mine ghost then. So we just have them all covered. Ghosts
There
and
you go.
extra.
We did it. But yeah, no errata on last week's episode. It's weird to just like do errata on talking about me,
Right.
And it's not like there. It's like what. I don't know. It was a weird episode to have like conversations about because people are just talking. There's nothing to correct, and yeah, I don't know. I don't really have much to say about it. The only thing I'll throw one thing out there is Brian on our Discord and Tom Booms started a conversation. A few of us had a conversation about the thing I said about the Embers and Muwat's promissory note. Just being that, like, I think it's good. It's not that I think it is good, or especially it's the highest value promissory note. Obviously, that means there are tricky things to do with it. So basically, all I was meaning to say about the Embers and Muwat promissory note is that I think it's the most underutilized promissory note. It is very hard to use, and it costs a fleet supply to give it out and then have someone use it against you. But I'm just curious if there is a way, if you're a really savvy deal-making player, if you can make it work. And so that's something I want to try eventually. It's not that I think it's actually the best promissory. No, it's that it is like technically worth the most. It is the most valuable promissory note. And so surely that must be worth something.
Right. Well, I would prefer no more talk of this because every time that you bring this up, I'm just gritting my teeth over here, just
You're
being
done
like,
with Muwat.
all right, do it. Prove it then. Just do it.
Exactly. Yeah. Let me get you out of this mental vacuum then. And I'm going to do the rundown real quick. What do you say?
Yeah, do it.
You can follow us at Space Cats Pod on Twitter for game updates and announcements, and Space Cats Peace Turtles on Facebook for announcements, and you can ask me questions on there. We post every single week on the Twilight Imperium subreddit, and so you can join in discussion. I think this will be a really fun episode to discuss with people of what they think will happen in these picks and bans and drafts and everything, and just like what do they think will be the most common factions, and why would you ban a specific faction? I think this is going to be a fun one to discuss leading up to the tournament. You can also discuss with us on our Board Game Geek Guild and email us at spacecatspieceturtles@gmail.com to send us plays of the week and submissions for This Imperium Life. These are in-game stories that you send to us that are just fun, amazing moments that happen within your games. You can join our Discord for fun conversations and to get a bunch of your Patreon benefits. This is where we do the bulk of our communicating with our fan base and talk through, Galactic Council episodes and how we organize our Gunyid Brotherhood game, everything like that. Speaking of Patreon, you can join it. Join our Patreon. The signups for the tournament are closed, but we're obviously going to try to find some things in the future here to give our Patreon benefits. So if you are a $1 level Patreoner and you're wondering why would I continue joining, well, we're let's get through this tournament some, but we're gonna have some value. I think there's gonna be future tournaments, things like that, and in general, all the higher tiers give you lots of impact on the show itself.
Right.
Please rate us on your podcast app of choice. Apple Podcasts and iTunes is what gives us the most benefit. It increases our visibility and helps people discover the show.
Yeah. I wanted to do a quick Patreon update.
Sure.
We're about to play a Goodyen Brotherhood game. It will have happened by the time you're hearing this.
Yeah.
So there's that. Also, we have a Galactic Council episode coming up next week, right?
Yeah, we're gonna make that happen. So definitely get on the Discord so you can find the poll for that episode, and you can get your vote in on what you want next week's episode to be about.
And we also want to be reaching out to the Space Kitties because I would like to do a Space Kitty episode very soon. So
I know there's one Space Kitty in particular that's been sending me some ideas that I look forward. I haven't actually talked to Hunter about it yet, but they've thrown out a few different ideas for episodes.
Ooh.
So I'm excited. I think we've got a Space Kitty episode in the works right now that we might have out before too long.
All right, cool. I am Hunter Donaldson. I'm a comedian and out of Portland, Oregon. And I just want to let you know some dates that I got because I got a lot going on this November. So every Thursday, you can see me co-host a comedy show called Earthquake Hurricane, which is at Ford Food and Drink. That starts at 8 p.m. On election day, well, today, the day that you're hearing this, I will be at a show called Results May Vary, which is an election day comedy show at Kelly's Olympian. That starts at 5 p.m. Go out, vote, and then, watch us joke about voting and stuff and politics. Or don't. It just depends.
It depends on how the night goes.
Right. For you. And, and however you think, however you feel. If it's going to go, you know what? It's going to go one way for some people and one way for other people.
Well, based on how things look, it's going to go one way for both sides.
Oh, that's true.
Depending on which thing you're looking at.
It's going to be a fun, just a little side note, a little fun election note. This one's going to have a little something for everybody. So November 7th, I'm going to be a guest on a podcast called Did We Solve It? That is at Kickstand Comedy Theater. It starts at 9 p.m. That's a super cool show that I do, that my friend Jake, Shane Brendan, and Niraj Srinivasan do about race, and it's going to be really saucy and fun. And then you can check out a show I produce called Comedy Bender, and that will be on November 10th. Starting at noon at the Lamp. That's like the brunch comedy show that I've been doing for a while. And, I always like to say, come out and I will get you a mimosa, and we can actually, this is what's cool about Comedy Bender is like, we can actually hang if you come out, like we can talk and actually get some time. Some of these other shows, it's like, I'm just there as a guest. So it's like kind of, it just, I don't really even know what my night's going to look like, but Comedy Bender, I run the show. So I'm going to be there from start to finish. So that's great. And that'll do me. That'll do me for this one.
Great. Well, I want to thank some Space Kitties. I want to thank Jim Boff, Jada Pake, and Dustin Doom. And I also want to thank the players that we are about to play a game with. Hopefully we're about to play a game with Kraken, Yin for Life, and Mike. So thank you all. I'm sure we had a great game. Hunter, do you want to read the play of the week?
Yeah. This play of the week is from Falcone. This is, so it's round 3, and there is an agenda phase. So the first agenda is a fairly innocuous one. The extra player to the left of the speaker uses all of their votes to elect themselves minister of something. Everyone else abstains, that kind of deal. So extras used all their votes. The second agenda is public execution. That spicy, lovely agenda that reads this way. Elect player. Elect player discards all action cards, passes the speaker token to their left if they have it, and can't vote on future agendas this agenda phase. So this is a crazy situation that happened. Isarl was the speaker, so you know how that turns out.
Right.
And Isarl is in the lead with 5 victory points and has 10 plus action cards. So obviously they're going to pick Isarl. Necro goes ahead and predicts that Isarl will be executed so that Necro can get some tech. Jolnar uses Leadership Rider, making the exact same prediction. Isarl doesn't have that many votes and sees what's going on, so Isarl throws down Imperial, Tech, and Politics Rider, all of them predicting their own demise. So at this point, the only players left with any votes are Arborek with about 6, and Falcone, our Play of the Week sender inner, who's playing as Yin, and they have 18. So obviously, he has no
court.
Right. It's completely Yin's situation, and they have no intention of giving Isarl all of their riders, especially the victory points. So that would be silly. So they basically asked everyone for a bribe to not be executed, which is just delicious. So delicious. It's like it's such a little cupcake. He got Jolnar's research agreement, Extra's racial promissory note, Arborek's ceasefire, and in the end chose to execute Necro, therefore denying all of the riders and the Necro tech prediction. And that, what so much fun. That's great.
I love it because so often the agenda phase turns into this thing of like, all right, so who wants this? Who's going to pay me? And everyone's like, no, I'm not going to. No, it doesn't matter. And it's not a big deal. Or if it's the opposite, it's like, who doesn't want this as a target? It's kind of just like, well, I don't have enough to pay you with. But this is like, no, I cannot lose all my action cards. I cannot lose. Like, it's just too much. It's so delicious that they get to just be like, essentially for one vote or for at most 7 votes just completely decide everything here. Actually, no, it's the second agenda, so it doesn't matter. They have all 18.
Right.
And yeah, it's just like, yeah, you in this rare situation, you all have to pay me. You have to pay me.
Yeah, that's so juicy. Honestly, I've kind of come around on writers lately. Like I remember we had this game recently where a really innocuous agenda came out, and we played every single writer on that. Do you remember this?
Yeah, yes.
And we just completely.
It was 7. It was 7 writers on one agenda.
Right. Yeah. I love it. They are when it's the right agenda and people are playing them correctly. Agendas or writers are so much fun.
Yeah, I agree. Well, that's gonna do it for us. I'm just so excited to get this tournament kicked off and to start seeing how things shake out with our predictions, but also just how everyone decides to play in this kind of specific rule set we've outlined. So I don't know. I cannot wait. It's still gonna be some time before we get it all set up, but I am gonna be just like shaking in my britches every day until that point.
What's so the this is weird because I actually realize I don't know this, and we're at the very end of the episode, but what the cutoff will have already happened, like by the time this comes out.
Yeah, well, so the cutoff for the Patreon is done. That was last week.
Right.
The cutoff to get your submission is, I think we decided we were going to give them like another week, right? So like up until next week's episode is sort of the idea.
Perfect.
Right. So this is today is the 6th that this episode came out. So by the end of the 12th is when we're going to shut down the submission form, Google form. You know, that will be done, and I will run the tally of everybody who's in it, and that will be the final count.
Ooh! Last minute thing. I just thought of this. Would this be a great idea? Okay. Could we put out a poll of every faction and just have people say, who do you think's going to do the best of the tournament? Faction.
I'll do that. I'll set that up.
That sounds great.
We'll talk about that next week.
Yay! This is wow. All right, this is weird into this
I'm excited
episode.
for the way the show is going to change while the tournament's going on, because there's going to be a lot of this kind of stuff, like very reactionary, just like, let's talk about these like specific games and these specific moments.
Yeah,
I can't wait.
Well, we should go, Matt.
We should go. We're starting a game in like 6 minutes.
Yeah, we're starting a game, and we're having like post-episode talk in the episode.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Space Cat's Peace Turtles, and thanks to Ben Prunty for the use of his music. You can find more at benpruntymusic.com and benprunty.bandcamp.com. Pax Magnifica, Bellum Gloriosum.